When you need to send the perfect rose bouquet, only one brand can say they've been the floral authority for 50 years. 1-800-Flowers. Why should you trust 1-800-Flowers? They hand-select every stem to ensure top quality. And with nationwide delivery, smiles and satisfaction are 100% guaranteed. And right now, when you order a dozen multicolored roses, we'll double it at no extra cost. Don't miss out on this limited time offer. Order today at 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/podcast.
Hey everybody, Randy Patterson here, and on today's episode I have a very special treat for you. The gentleman is named Rick Vito. He may not sound familiar to you unless you're really deep into who's on albums that are not necessarily names you see in the big marquees, but this man has been around for a long time in rock and roll and has played on countless albums. He has a new album out called Slidemaster, and you might ask, why Slidemaster? Well, number one, you got to watch the interview to get the full answer to that question. But secondly, he's not only an amazing guitarist, but he is a master slide guitarist as well. And I don't have to point to any other iconic song than Bob Seger's Like a Rock as an example. You've heard it on his album, that great slide work, actually 2 solos on there. And we even heard it on a Chevrolet commercial. They used that as their theme song for quite a while. In addition to Bob Seger, gosh, this man has played for everybody. Delaney and Bonnie and Friends, you remember them from our interview with Bonnie Bramlett several years ago. The late Bobby Whitlock, who was near and dear to our hearts. The late John Mayall, Jackson Brown, Little Richard, Roger McGuinn, Roy Orbison, Dobie Gray, John Fogerty, Stevie Nicks, Albert Collins, Dolly Parton, Maria Muldaur. Man, I mean, if that wasn't enough, he's exceptionally notable for his time with Fleetwood Mac. When Lindsey Buckingham famously left the band for a while, they pulled in Rick Vito. Not only was he in Fleetwood Mac for a while, and he's on a few of their albums, he was also in Mick Fleetwood's blues band, and he and Mick are really, really good friends. And as I mentioned a moment ago, Rick is also seen and found on countless other very high-profile albums. So obviously, this is going to want to be an interview you want to hear in its entirety. As I always ask, if you don't already do it, please hit like if you're liking this interview. And secondly, if you're not already a Boomerocity subscriber, just hit that subscribe button. It won't cost you a dime. And please, 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 please share this interview with any of your friends you think might like this kind of interview with this kind of artist, because it is very entertaining. And ask them to become a subscriber too. Tell them it's free. Tell them it's a gift from you. How about that? And so without any further ado, here is my first of what I hope are many more interviews to come with the amazing Rick Vito. Until next time, this is Randy Patterson with Boomerocity. Take care. Hello, Rick.
Hello there.
How are you doing today?
Good, Randy. How are you? It is Randy, right?
That is correct. Last time I checked. I want to apologize right up front. I'm not trying to draw too much attention to myself here, but I had emergency eye surgery last week, and I don't know, it's this eye here, so if it does something weird or whatever, I'm not a weirdo. I'm going through recovery from reattaching my retina. So
I love to do that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's so much fun.
So much fun. Well,
I just love connecting.
Recovery.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Where are you clicking in from?
Franklin, Tennessee.
All right. I'm just east of you. I'm over in the Smoky Mountains.
Oh, okay. Nice over there.
Yeah, it is. And it's relatively quiet right now. Some spring breakers, but nothing too terribly bad. I lived for about a year in the Nashville area, in the Sylvan Park area. I worked downtown and right up until COVID. So love Nashville.
Yeah, it's very different now. Even since COVID, especially. I don't know if that what it had to do with anything, but it's quite a bit different. Um, Quite a lot of building has taken place
Yes. My
since
gosh,
then, and
especially that skyline.
yeah, I mean, it's to me, it's sort of lost a little bit of its country charm, and they're trying to make it into like a little bit of Los Angeles or I don't know what, but
Vegas.
it's
They call it Nash Vegas.
Vegas, yeah,
Yes.
Nash Vegas, yeah,
Well, I have cousins that live there in the Brentwood area, and a very elderly aunt, and 90 something years old, and she's got more energy than I do. But she lives over
yeah,
there in the Brentwood area, and a lot of friends, Nancy Andrews, Rafe Van Hoy, on and on.
yeah.
Just
A
a
lot of
lot of
people
great
live
guys
there.
there, man. Yeah,
Yeah.
especially in that business. Hey, before we get started, I know there's so much I want to talk with you about, Rick, and I went right up into turning on this meeting, editing my questions. There is just so much I could ask you about, and
Mhm.
I want to make it as less painful for you as possible. But one person I want to focus on before we talk about this album is somebody you worked with who died recently, and I think the world of. I just wanted to share my personal story about him and maybe get a nice story from you about him. And that's Bobby Whitlock. I
Sure.
I talked. I was interviewing him. Well, to give you a little bit of the backstory, I was my dad's caregiver until October when he passed away. He was suffering from Alzheimer's or dementia, and I was his caregiver for 2 years. And during that time, I was I had my office and studio in his basement. I lived next door to him, but my studio was in his basement where it is right now. And in the middle of my interview with Bobby, my dad comes down and just starts asking me questions. And then he turns around, goes back upstairs, and I turned around and I apologized to Bobby and said, "Man, I'm so sorry." And I explained it very quickly, the situation. And he just goes, "Oh man, have him come back down, sit with us. He's probably more interesting than I am." He says, "Let's just keep it real," and that spoke
Yeah.
so much to me as far as the kind of man Bobby was, and I was heartbroken when I heard that he had passed. What's some reflection you have of Bobby?
So we were talking about Bobby Whitlock, and I first went out to California in the summer of 1971 after meeting Delaney and Bonnie and Friends. I loved their two records that they had out, and of course Bobby was a part of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I introduced myself to them and kept going to their shows. They invited me to sit in one night, and they liked my sound, and of course I knew all their material. So they recommended that I move to California, to Los
Mm-hmm.
Angeles from Pennsylvania, where I was going to college. And so at the end of the school year, I did. And to my surprise and amazement, they hired me, and I went on the road with them. And when I got back from that, it kind of like was Delaney had taken on too many band members. We had three guitar players, three horn players. He said, "I have to cut back, and you're the new guy, so I got to let you go." So
Mm-hmm.
almost immediately after that, I got a call from Bobby Whitlock on the phone. I had never met him. And he said, "Man, I'm starting a solo career. And I've heard you play from these tapes that you had sent to Bonnie," which I had sent some, things that I had recorded to Delaney and Bonnie. And she played them for Bobby. And so he said, "I love exactly what you're doing. Is exactly what I want. And I'm starting a solo career. And we're going in the studio with Jimmy Miller, who's producer of the Rolling Stones." And
Mm-hmm.
he said, "I'd like to meet you and, come on up to the house." So I went up to the house and was hanging out. We just jammed and played. And finally, he asked me if I would play on this recording session that Jimmy was going to produce. and it featured Jim Keltner and a really famous
Chuck Leavell?
No, he's a bass player.
Oh,
I forget his name, but very renowned. And so I was scared to death, but I accepted. So I went to the studio, and it was so funny because it was a song that really had a lot of wide open spaces for the lead guitar to take off. It was a kind of raucous rock and roll thing.
mm-hmm.
And so I did, I just went for it. And we get to the end of the take, and it's really a great take, and we're listening back, and the door opens, and in walk my two idols, the guys who I learned to play and sing and everything about rock and roll and blues awareness. Mick Jagger and Keith Richards walk in. So I'm freaking out because I'm like 21 and I'm green and I'm in way over my head already, let alone these guys coming in. So it gets to the end of the playback. First thing out of their mouth was, "Who's the guitar player?" And I kind of raised my hand, meekly, and I said, "Me." And he gave me the thumbs up. "Really nice, man, really nice." So my whole world was validated in that one moment.
Wow.
So that was my introduction to working with Bobby. And so later we went on tour. I joined the band. We traveled all around the country, and later did the record for real.
Uh-huh.
It's called Raw Velvet, I believe.
Very cool. I mean, I bet you felt like if nothing else happened with your career right then, just that whole moment would have been like, "Hey, I'm good,"
I still think about it all the time. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. And yeah.
Very
So
nice.
it was great to work with Bobby and Jimmy Miller and I just started meeting a lot of people when I went out to Los Angeles through Delaney and Bonnie and Bobby and all the people I was meeting at that point in time.
Well, before we get to your album here, I'll mention my Bonnie Bramlett story. I was living in Phoenix, and I tried to dabble a little bit into contemporary Christian concerts. And Joe English had left Paul McCartney and Wings, and started, went solo into Christian music. And I was, sponsoring and producing his first public concert, and it was there in the Phoenix area. Well, a couple weeks before the concert, I get a call from the promoter, and they said, "Hey, one of his friends is going to tour with him and wants to open for him. Do you mind?" I said, "Well, who is it?" And they said, "Bonnie Bramlett." And I said, "Well, but of course," because she was having an album coming out. Well, this is on the heels of John Lennon getting killed, so I had every nutcase in the valley contacted me because of the Beatles connection there. But the Saturday night before the concert was on a Wednesday night, she's on Saturday Night Live with Delbert McClinton, who you also worked with. And yes. It was a perfect storm. Had a full house. Joe was great. Bonnie was wonderful. And then, of course, years later when I launched Boomerocity, she was kind enough to sit for a phone interview with me, and kind of lost track of her. I think she's fallen off the radar. Last I heard, she moved back to St. Louis. Have you heard anything on her?
Yes, I was just in touch with her daughter, Becca, who was just a 3-year-old when I was doing that gig.
Mm-hmm.
And she's, from what I heard, not in great health right now. She is in St. Louis. And, we're sending out good thoughts and prayers for her recovery.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I kind of suspected that, but wonderful lady. I owe her an internal debt of gratitude for both of those events, the concert and the interview. But man, I love this album of yours. It is amazing. What drew you to doing this kind of album now? And give me the backstory about behind the title, behind how long it took to put together, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think this is my 12th record, and on all the previous ones, I sang, mostly the songs were sung, and I had 2 or 3 instrumentals on every record. And people through the years, they know me. People know me as a guitar player first, not as a
Right.
singer first. And people through the years would say, "Hey, you should do a instrumental record someday." I said, it always stuck in the back of my mind. I always loved the very first Freddie King record that I had, which was entirely instrumental.
Mm-hmm.
And so the angle was when I started assembling all my instrumentals, which I had about 30 of, new and older that had been featured already, was most of them were slide guitar. So I thought, well, why not do an entirely slide guitar instrumental record? It hasn't been done too often. And as usually, the singing goes along with most of the artists that do slide guitar. So that's where that came from. So I decided to do about half of my favorite ones that were previously released, and I remixed and remastered those, and then combine that with about half of new things that I've been recording more recently. So
Wow.
that's how
Very
that
cool.
came about. Slidemaster is just kind of a take on the guitar jazz master,
Yeah.
Slidemaster
Yeah. There you go. Borrowing from Fender a little bit there,
a little bit.
huh? And how long did it take you to put this together? I mean, you said you remastered some, so I imagine a lot of time was in the studio just remixing and all that on the remasters, but on the new stuff and all that, how long did it take to put this together?
Well, I guess my last record came out 2 years ago, so I guess after living with that one for about a year, I suppose I started, you know, recording, and it's not just the recording of a record, it's assembling the songs that go together well,
Mm-hmm.
and the right takes and the right mixes. And so I tried to spend as much time as I could just picking the right songs, because at first it was going on in many different directions. I had like, okay, this is going to be a 20 song CD, and after living with that for a while, I thought, no, I think I should concentrate on songs that sound good together and keep it at 10 to 12. So we
Mm-hmm.
decided on 12.
That's like trying to pick your favorite child, I would imagine, right? So,
It is. It is. It really is. But the good thing is I have volume 2 practically finished.
there you go. And we'll sit down and have another conversation about it when that comes out.
I hope
Were,
so.
what was, well, let me put it this way. I know you've worked on a lot of albums with a lot of people. Like you said, this is your 12th solo album.
Yeah.
It's probably hard to surprise you a little bit in the studio, I would imagine, with all that experience and background. But were there any surprises in putting this album together?
Any surprises in putting it
Yeah,
together?
yeah.
I was surprised that when I honed in on certain songs that it did have a uniformity, that I've actually been playing my style as it is now for probably 15 to 20 years. And I didn't realize that had gone back that far, because the first record, as going back to Bobby Whitlock, first record that I played slide on was 1972 on Bobby's record, on a couple of cuts. But my style wasn't very developed back then, and it took many years and going through different changes and working with different artists to develop the style that I feel comfortable with today. But I guess I was surprised that it actually has been around for a little while now, longer than I
Huh.
thought.
It's funny how that works. Our mind kind of compresses things, and then when you start looking at the timeline, it's like, holy crap,
Yeah,
it's been going on this long.
yeah.
Is on the album, is there, I used to ask, and I quickly learned not to do this, I used to ask what's your favorite song on the record, and as I alluded to earlier, it's kind of like picking your favorite child, and we're
Yeah,
really not supposed to do that. So
right.
I liked what Chris Stamey of the DBs said. He said he called it the gateway drug. Is there a song on this album that's a gateway drug to the rest of the album, where you say, "Hey, fans, if you like this song, you're really going to love the rest of the record"?
Well, part of me would say the first song is meant to catch your ear and
Mm-hmm.
want you to listen to the rest of the record. But the second song is it's called "Steal Away." It's an
Mm-hmm.
instrumental version of the song that was originally recorded by a guy called Jimmy Hughes. It was the first hit that ever came out of Muscle Shoals. And I've always loved it. It's been recorded by quite a few artists over the years.
Mm-hmm.
And that um, that approach, giving the slide guitar a vocal treatment, a vocal style. In other words, listening to the original song was a vocal. And so listening to that and trying to express myself in a vocal style on the slide guitar would be the second thing that I wanted to accomplish with the record. So I think that appears on quite a few of the other songs, right down to the last one.
Is there a track on the album that you feel clearly represents you as a slide player or today as an artist, that if you looked at it and said, this encapsulates pretty well who I am as a musician today? Is there a song on the album that does that for you?
I'd go back to those first two songs because basically they make the statement, and the songs that follow those two kind of draw on that approach.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I would have to say that.
That makes sense. Were there specific songs that kind of came together especially quickly, and then or were there others that took more time to get it just right? And it's like, wow, I need to take number 442 or what have you.
Yeah, well, I try not to drive myself too crazy with all this stuff.
Probably hard to do though, isn't it?
It is, usually I try to take the first or second pass of everything I record, and I'll take those two tracks, I'll listen to both of them, and maybe pick bits from both. Or sometimes I'm lucky and I get it all in one pass.
Ah,
So
nice.
quite a few of the things, like "Steal Away," um, the first song, "Vegas Jump," "Steal Away," "The Big Beat," um, "Red Hot Baby." They all were pretty much easy. They just flowed right out, so I got
Mm-hmm.
those in one or two takes, and then just spent more time making sure that everything was in tune, and didn't have to do too much to it really, just getting a good mix.
Mm-hmm. Did you record in your own home studio, or did you go to outside studios to work on this?
About half and half.
Half and half.
Um, yeah, some of the older things that I've chose to include on the collection were recorded in a studio some time ago, and then the newer ones were in my home studio.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Um, w- I'm not a musician. I used to dink around on the guitar when I was a kid and realized I did not really have the talent for that. Took music theory. I was in choir, took some piano lessons. So, got the message quite clearly that I have no musical talent, but I have an ear for it. I love theory. Even though I haven't studied it in many years, but I love the music side of things. So I know enough to kind of read through some things. And what I've heard some people say before in the past is that, slide guitar is just messy. And I say they're not listening to it correctly, because they feel like you're just sliding into the notes, you're doing this, you're doing that. Better than that. So you could argue against that a lot more articulate, in a more articulate way than I could. What do you think that people miss when it comes to playing slide guitar?
Um, I've done a couple of instructional slide guitar things. One, you know, I'm not really a teacher, so I'm not the best teacher, but one thing I tried to point out was if you're going to do this, first of all, you can't take your guitar that's set up with slinky strings and low action and put a slide on your finger and expect for it to sound good. It's going to
Oh,
sound terrible. And
yeah.
I think most people, that's what they try first. Maybe they'll tune to a chord or something, but it still doesn't sound right to them and they give up on it. So I tell people, first of all, you have to have a guitar that's your designated slide guitar. And you've got to experiment with raising your action up higher, much like, steel guitars and lap steel guitars. Those strings were high up off the fretboard.
Right.
And so you have to get a height that you're comfortable with that gets you high enough off those frets so you don't get buzzing and all these unpleasant noises. And then sometimes it's good to put heavier strings on your guitar. That'll give you more sustain and a rounder tone, which is good for slide. So that those two things right off the bat um, would help people who are frustrated with their first attempts at playing slide guitar. And it sometimes it's so obvious, but if someone doesn't tell you, it might go over your head,
Well,
and you
I
might not
mean,
pick up on that on your own.
as you were saying all that, my mind was going back over various concerts I've been to or videos I've watched. I mean, Ronnie Wood comes to mind where he brings out the lap guitar when he's doing uh, Happy, that slide solo on Happy, and uh, right away, you're right. Those strings are noticeably higher, and I wouldn't have thought of those kinds of things as far as string gauge and height and all that kind of stuff. So that makes a lot of sense. What do you feel when it comes to your steel play or slide playing? If you were to point to any particular guitarist that had the biggest impact on you and your style and your knowledge of playing slide, who would that be? Is there any one that just really nailed it for you on that?
Well, got a lot of influences. There's a lot of people I like, but the guy that I think most people quote, and it's undeniable if you're a blues player, it has to be Omar James,
Mm-hmm.
because he's the first guy that, electrified that slide and is so powerful. And he didn't stray far from his what he played. So he might have played the same thing quite a few times. He had that signature lick, of course, the Elmore
Mm-hmm.
James lick. But he put so much feeling and emotion into it, and it just sounds so darn cool, what he played. And so he's never far from my mind when I'm playing. Of course, there are many other players that played differently or maybe stretched out a little bit more. But he would be, a major. I think I haven't heard any major slide guitar player who hasn't, paid respects to Elmore in a big way.
Yeah. What I know, I've heard stories, read a lot of biographies and autobiographies of people that at one time or another played slide guitar, and I hear all sorts of different stories of what they use and have experimented with on the slide itself. I mean, using beer
Yeah.
bottles, salt shakers. I know when I was dinking around on a guitar as a kid, I had some little chrome steel thing. I couldn't even stick my finger in it. I just kind of gripped it, within the grooves of two or three fingers, and it sounded terrible, but it was a nice smooth chrome metal piece. Of course, you see all the plastic stuff that you can buy at Guitar Center and such. What do you think gives you the best tone that you like in playing slide?
I started off again. Bobby Whitlock comes into the picture. He gave me a Coricidin bottle that was filled with wax that he told me had belonged to Dwayne. And I kept it for
Really?
years and years. And one day I went to look for it and it disappeared. Well, that was the first thing I used. But soon after that, I heard that some couple of guys that I admire, John Hammond Jr. and Lowell George, both used a Sears socket, like that you used to take
Yeah.
your spark
Spark
plugs out of
plugs.
your
Yeah.
car. So they used either 11/16 or 5/8. So for years and years and years, I still have mine, quite a few of them. You could go to Sears automotive department and get yourself a new slide for
Wow.
$8 or $6 or whatever it was.
A
So I
lifetime
got used to
warranty.
right. I got used to the weight of that, and that produced a really good sound. It was very slick, it didn't hang up on the strings or anything.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't like thin glass slides so much. I don't like a lot of the metal slides that are sold in stores, and I use either the Sears socket, or there's a company called Acoustic Glide. Um, it's actually the company's Latch Lake, and they make slides called Acoustic Glide slides, which are very, very dense. They use a couple of different alloys to get a very, very slick, uh, hard surface. And I've used those for probably 15 years now also. Those are my
Wow.
two favorites.
Yeah. When you mentioned that about the sockets, that's what mine looked like, except I think it must have been something that would screw on to a bolt of some sort and created a foot space or
Yeah,
something. I don't know. It may have come off a motorcycle for all I know. I think I've
yeah,
long since lost it. But
yeah,
heavy, but like I said, I couldn't stick my finger in it, so I
yeah.
just grip it. Man, I liked how easily it would slide, but of course I couldn't play with the darn, so it didn't matter. But it's interesting what you guys use to come up with the kinds of sounds that you're looking for, especially if it's like us novices would think it doesn't matter, but it does.
Yeah, and everybody's different. That's what works
Mm-hmm.
for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I see some people that still use little glass bottles, and
Mm-hmm.
they sound great.
Yep.
They may have their action low, and their strings may not be as thick as mine. Whatever works for you is what I tell people, because you have to experiment with what's comfortable.
That's right. That's right. Hey, Rick, I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. Do you
We're
have
good.
time
We're
for some
good.
more? All right, good
We're
deal.
good.
Good deal. Um, so I probably should ask this towards the end of the conversation, but I'll ask it now. With this album, are you going to be doing any shows that people can come out and see you perform some of this stuff, or is this just going to be an album type of release for you with no touring or no gigs to back it up?
Currently, I'm not touring, and the reason for that is um, I've found that when I start to carry suitcases, amps, guitars, and set up my equipment, um, it sometimes proves to not be good on the back.
I hear you.
So unless I can do it in such a way where I have help to do all those extraneous things that are apart from performing,
Hmm.
I probably will just be doing gigs that I can drive to, and not
Hmm.
so much, flying to different places like I've done for over 50 years. But we'll
Yeah.
see, we'll just see how that works out. Sometimes, you should never say never.
That's right. That's right. Somehow or other, it kind of comes back around to haunt you. Do
Yeah.
you feel, as a question I forgot to ask you, do you feel any of these songs, since they're pretty much all done electric, do you feel like any of these songs transfer over to an acoustic version that, to your point about touring, if somebody said, hey, I want to set up a nice little intimate gig in, say, Knoxville or down in Huntsville or something, and just bring your bring an acoustic and we'll mic it up and cut you loose. Does any of this transfer over acoustically for you?
Well, I could do it. I could do probably quite a bit on an acoustic slide. There's one acoustic track on the record, River of Blues, that was cut on a 1929 National steel body guitar. But it's just as easy to bring an electric guitar and it's a very small amp as an acoustic guitar. For me, I can express myself a little better that way.
Oh, that makes sense. So you talked about the guitar. It sounds like you might be you're a guitarist, so I'm sure you have a few. Do you have a pretty good collection of guitars that you draw from, or do you have a basic 4 or 5 that you pretty much stick with?
No, I have more than I need. There's always that, you just need one more. But I've started paring down because it's really getting ridiculous. At this point, I know I can't play all of the guitars that I own. And this past year, I gave a couple away to friends and I've sold a few. I design guitars and I work in tandem with the Reverend Guitar Company on co-designing my signature models. I've had 4 different signature models with them. So those guitars all work and sound really good to me. And of course, I have a bunch of prototypes, and then I have some true vintage guitars, and then others that are workhorses that I get a certain sound from that I couldn't feel comfortable getting rid of. So I guess I'm down to maybe 40 instruments or so, down from 100.
Just 40, you poor soul, you. So.
Yeah, it's terrible, really. But I'm making progress.
Do you go to a self-help group for that? Hi, I'm Rick, and I'm a guitar addict.
Syndrome.
Yeah. So in selling any of these, I know you probably live fairly close to Joe Bonamassa. I saw him in concert here last night, or in Knoxville. And of course, he's notorious for being the collector he is. Has he bought any from you?
No.
No. Okay. Just curious. So let's, if you don't mind, let's talk about some of the people you've worked with, and maybe if any of these people affected how you approach this album. And I want to start with some of the people that I've actually had the benefit or privilege of chatting with that you've also worked with. I mentioned Bonnie Bramlett. How did Delaney's styles affect you in playing this album? And do you have a favorite Delaney and Bonnie story to share?
Well, Delaney was pretty much a rhythm guy who, he would take some solos and stuff on the show, but he was basically a really good rhythm player. That's how I would categorize Delaney. So not so much as far as influence. I'll go back. It's just a funny thing that came around. I mentioned I emailed Becca when I was on tour with Delaney and Bonnie. And this goes back to '71. I was in their room, and Delaney took off this guitar strap, or he picked it up and he threw it in the trash can. It was one of those old, remember when they were doing the kind of flowers, kind of cloth guitar straps with flowers?
Woven type of, yeah.
Yeah, those. And I said, he's throwing that away. And he said, yeah, I broke the end of it. It's made of plastic. I said, do you mind if I keep it as a souvenir? He said, no, help yourself. So I kept that guitar strap for about, 30, 35 years or something. And I came across it about 5 years ago. And I said, Delaney had passed away. And I thought, I bet you she would like to have this. So I boxed it up and I sent it to her, and she loved it. And, really meant a lot to her. Well, just like last week, I was going through Facebook and somebody posted a picture of Delaney and Eric Clapton on stage. And sure enough, Delaney had that strap on. So I copied the photo and I sent it to Becca, and she just flipped, just because it was a documentation that
Yep.
he indeed had that strap, and it was part of his most famous period of his career. So I
Yep.
was glad that happened.
That's cool. I had interviewed Michelle way early in my Boomerocity days here, and I know she worked very hard to get Delaney and Bonnie into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and the fact that they're not, I think, is a crime. That's
They
the
were
impact
very
they could.
influential in a very concerted point of time,
Yep.
somewhere around 1969 and 70, and they really did influence a lot of people.
Yes, they did.
And a lot of people spun off from Delaney and Bonnie, but it didn't sustain. Their act did not sustain. I think that maybe is why that it's been so difficult for that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah, because they do have those weird rules of what all has to happen. I mean, Rick Derringer is another one that probably should have been there, especially before he passed. But someone else you've worked with, I had the privilege of interviewing, who is also no longer with us, is John Mayall. Uh, how did he impact your career? And was there anything from that work you've done with him that influenced this album at all?
Well, Larry Taylor from Canned Heat, the great bass player, was
Mm-hmm.
working with John at the time, taking a hiatus from Canned Heat. And we were friends, and John was looking for a guitar player. This was in late 74, and brought me up to the house. And there was a lot of guitar players coming in and out, I guess. So we just jammed for 3 or 4 songs, and he said, if you want the gig, you've got it. So I had the gig with John Mayall, and I was, I was just couldn't believe it. You know, all the great guitar players that had worked with John, and to think that I was getting this gig. The main way that John influenced me um, was to not be afraid to step out on stage, to really go for it, and that transferred into the studio also, because we done a lot of recording. I did maybe 4 records with John, and if I was sitting down and just playing a solo, he'd sometimes come out and say, "You're almost there, but your energy's dull. Stand up and go for it." So he would always want you to go for it, express yourself all the way. And so that was the biggest thing I took away from working with John, and I guess that would be live and in the studio. To really go for it and put something special into it. So I've always tried to do that.
I saw him in concert one time here, and he was pretty much my dad's age, and watching him perform was, my dad had a lot of energy, but gosh, I can't imagine my dad being up on stage like John was, and just had these young guys behind him, and I mean, it was a treasure to watch and a pleasure, just to see him. He was holding court there on stage, is the way I took it, and the crowd just happened to be there to watch it all happen, and it,
He
it
was
was
one of a
amazing to
kind for
see.
sure.
Yep, yep. We lost
And
a good one on that.
well, he made his mark. Well done, I say, John. He made his very strong mark, and he was completely unique. And a lot of his records didn't have the impact that, say, like the one with Eric Clapton or Peter Green or Mick Taylor
Hmm.
had. But so what? He kept going, and his persona lasted his whole career. People loved John, and they loved the fact that he kept on going. And I was so happy that when we did the tribute to Peter Green concert in London in 2020, that John was a part of, that we got to play together and hang out again one more time. So, and he, as you say, his energy was, once he got on stage, he wasn't 80 some years old anymore. He was just
Nope.
John Mayall.
Yep. Timeless. Very timeless.
Yeah.
So, someone else you worked with who we lost recently that I got to talk to was Jesse Colin Young. And when I talked to him, I could tell there, he had felt better in different, in times past. So I tried to be respectful of all of that, but and then of course saddened when he passed. But what was your experiences like with him, and was there anything from those days that impacted this album at all?
Well, I'll tell you, there was only one day. I only met him one day. I did one session with him. It may have been more than one song. I can't remember. I do remember that some of Elvis's guys were on that session.
Really?
Jerry Sheff was on the bass, and Glenn D. Harden
Yeah.
was on piano. And I just remember he was a super nice guy. And, we cut this first song and went back into the playroom, and there was that voice of Jesse Colin Young. It was a classic voice.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was a classic, made his mark in a classic way with his voice. And he was a really great guy. But to tell you the truth, it was just that one day. I never saw him after that. But I was just glad I had the opportunity to work with him.
So you got to work. I mean, you were in the studio there with Jerry and Glenn. I mean, the stories those guys could tell. I mean, wow.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm friends with a guy. I played poker with a guy who's called Larry Strickland, and Larry was part of the gospel,
Imperials,
the male,
or the Stamps.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if he did the Imperials at that time, but what's it? I forget maybe it was Blackwoods or something. But
J.D.
anyway,
Sumner. I think he might have been with J.D. Sumner.
J.D. Sumner and the Stamps, maybe. Anyway, he was the bass singer in that, so he occasionally will tell us an Elvis story, firsthand experience.
Well, he was married to I always get the Judd girls mixed up.
Naomi.
Mama Judd. Naomi. Yeah, he was married to her when she passed.
Yeah, and we were good friends, so we used to play at their home here in Franklin. And I knew her pretty well for a few years, and was very, very sorry about that.
Yeah,
very
that
sorry.
was a tragedy.
Yeah, she was a great person.
Yeah, and that's, it goes to show we can't take mental health for granted, and it's nothing wrong with getting
Never
help.
expected that, though.
Yeah, that was out of left field. What there's others. Ned Evett, Todd Rundgren, Delbert McClinton, all the. The people that you've worked with is just, as I like to say, just unfriggin' believable. I think the big one that everybody points to is your work with Fleetwood Mac, stepping into Lindsey's shoes, and then working with Mick on the blues albums. What are some of your thoughts on the Fleetwood Mac era of your career and working with Mick on the blues stuff? Share some thoughts on that if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. I had been around them a few times over the course of the years, and I was friends with Billy Burnett, and Billy was always famous for saying to me, "Oh man, I love your playing. I got to get you on one of my records. I got to get you on one of my songs," or blah, blah, blah. And he never called. He would always forget about it. So I was over at a friend's house, John Heron, great friend of mine who passed. And he said he was going to do a Billy Burnett session that night. And I said, "Really?" I said, "Who else is playing?" Blah, 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 blah. And Mick's going to play drums. I said, "Really? Let me get Billy on the phone." So I called him and I said, "Billy, you're always saying you want me to play on your record. Well, tonight's the night. I'm not even going to charge you. I just want to play because all my friends are on this session and I'd like to do it." And he said, "Oh man, perfect. Come on down." So played with Mick that night and Billy and Michael Smotherman, some others. And we talked about the old Peter Green days, which I was tremendously influenced by Peter Green and that era of Fleetwood Mac. And he loved that because, that wasn't the forefront of, what he'd been experiencing in those years. It was all Stevie, Christine, Lindsey era, those songs, the insane popularity they had. So, and I was doing my own thing during that period. I really wasn't part of that rumors thing, had no impact on me, but the Peter Green era certainly did. And I think he liked that. And so he came out with Billy within 2 weeks to a club I was playing at, and we all sat in and played some of that old Fleetwood Mac kind of stuff, the bluesier things. And when Lindsay left, which was shortly after that, he called me right away and said, "Do you want to learn like 10 of our songs and come down and play and see how the chemistry is?" And so I did that, went down there. It wasn't really hard for me to learn their, I didn't have to learn any Lindsay songs except for Go Your Own Way. The rest of the songs they were going to concentrate on were Stevie's and Christine's. So they were fairly easy for me to learn. I'd heard a lot on the radio, and we all hit it off. And so again, at the end of the day, he came up, got Billy and me aside, and he said, "Well, obviously this works. You guys, if you want the gig, you're both. We would like to have you in the band." So that was great. And so continuing on learning more songs for the show, I said to Mick, "What about, can I do some of the Peter Green songs?" And of course, he and John loved that. So we worked up "Oh Well" and "Rattlesnake Shake" and "I Loved Another Woman," those kinds of things. So in the show, we had our little blues mini set within the the big hits set, and so the fans loved it, and it was part of, I think, at that point in time, why the fans accepted me into the group the way that the band did. And so it came a full circle for me, in a sense.
How fun. Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I got to ask, this is not so much a musical question as it is an atmospheric one. I mean, you stepped into Lindsay's shoes. I mean, everybody's heard what all was going on with, during rumors and this, that, and the other. Was it ever a thing for you where it's like, "Look, guys, I'm just going to come here and play. I don't want to get involved in the other stuff. Let's just play music"? Or was there anything like that going on?
There really wasn't. I mean, at that point in time, I got the impression that he wasn't happy to be there, and there was unhappiness that went down between he and the rest of the group. So, and again, we weren't doing, the only songs of his that we were doing were ones that he wrote with Chris. Mm-hmm. So, and I was never asked to play like him, and some of it I wouldn't have been able to anyway. We have completely different styles. Mm-hmm. So I had been in Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band and touring with them in the big stadiums and such. So it was the perfect time for me to segue from one superstar session setup into another. So I was comfortable, and I think that comfort zone translated fairly well for me to step into that.
Do you think you and Mick will do any more work together, especially any blues stuff?
It would really be nice if we could. I'll tell you, I just heard from him yesterday. He just got remarried again, and he's on his honeymoon. And so we do keep in touch, and I'll send him things that I've done. I'm just putting a CD in the mail to him for when he gets home. Distance is our only problem. He lives on Maui. I live in Tennessee. But I tell you, I love playing with Mick, and he loves playing with me. We have a special chemistry together. And so I hope that a scenario takes place in some future time that we can do that.
That would be so cool. I know that I probably don't rank at the level that he would spend time on, but I think it'd be so much fun to have you and him together just to talk about Peter, talk about the blues, what it means to each of you.
He would like to do that. That era and what we did with the Big Fleetwood Blues Band, he likes to talk about that. Let's
set something up. Let's do it. I would love that, and I'd let you guys just run with it. I don't need to talk so much as just let fans hear what you both have to say. That would be a blast to do, and I'd accommodate any schedules. Now, I'll edit this out. I'm getting married at the end of next month. If
Congratulations.
my eye, well, thank you. But let's work around that. And I think it'd be a blast. We'll just sit around and, drink coffee and talk of blues and some of the backstories to some of that earlier stuff and what you guys have done together. I think it would be so much fun, and fans would just eat that up.
Yeah, let's just do it. Just contact it. Things gets sorted out, and
Okay,
we'll
we'll
set
do.
it up.
You mentioned Bob Seger, and I was, my friends think I have an encyclopedic knowledge of music, and I remember a lot, but I'm nowhere near what they give me credit for. And one of the things I didn't know was that's your work on Like a Rock, and of course the commercials and all that kind of thing. I mean, I don't know how it is for you, Rick, but when I am listening to the radio and I hear somebody I've interviewed, or now I'll hear that song and think, oh wow, I got to talk to Rick Vito about that. This is cool. I mean, you've had so much involvement in so many key things. I mean, is it hard for you to switch on the radio and your mind not just race back to when you were laying down that solo or anything like that? What's that like for you?
It's funny because I'll hear songs, I'll hear like that song or something from Jackson Browne or Fleetwood Mac in Home Depot or the supermarket,
Elevator
So,
music.
yeah, you kind of want to like grab the nearest person and go, hear that? That's me. I did that 30 years ago. It can get really embarrassing. But yeah, I mean, it's always fun to hear it when something you did comes on the radio. Um, I certainly loved that Like a Rock took on a life of its own.
Yeah.
It was the solos and that almost didn't happen because when I went and met Bob that day, he put up that track and it had these long passages of nothing. And first thing I thought of was I'd like to try slide guitar solo on that. And he didn't want it. I said, I don't really like slide guitar. I said, okay, I understand. I said, but you may not have heard it the way I envision it. So would you give me one pass? Let me try it. So fortunately, he said, yeah, that's fine. And so fortunately, I got the whole song, the front solos and the back solo on the first take. The
Wow.
only thing I had to patch was the end of the solos because I didn't know where it was going to end, the
Mm-hmm.
song. And that was a keeper. Tried other ones after that. Never had the magic that the first one had. So that sort of established my relationship with Seeger right from the get-go.
Very cool.
Yeah,
Wow. Do you think he'll get back into action again, or is he truly going to stay retired forever?
he's a fellow I don't keep in touch with, and I never hear from his camp. So I really wouldn't know.
Ah, I see. I see. Um, is there anybody you haven't worked with yet that you still would like to before you quit playing?
That's a good question. It's one I haven't really thought about too much. Hmm. Gee, I've worked with so many of the people that I admired. So many of them are gone now,
Yeah.
So I'm glad I had the chance to work with them when I did. Trying to think who else is still around. Uh, I'm drawing a blank on that one. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's boy, I tell you that it seemed like for a while, a few years ago, I was always reporting on who had passed away, and for a while, I was in regular contact with Rob Parisi from Wild Cherry. Play that funky music, and he started calling me the Grim Reaper of rock and roll because it seemed like every other day I was mentioning who had passed, and I was blessed to be able to talk to some of these people before they passed, and one or two was their last interviews they did before they passed. And so, to me, it was an honor to be able to do that. And for the ones I was the last ones that interviewed him, I would have gladly let someone else be that person if it meant for the artist to live longer, But we're losing so many. And do you feel like there's anybody in the ranks coming up that is taking the mantle in a way that you feel good about when it comes to blues, when it comes to slide, when it comes to music in general?
There's so many good players and singers, younger people. I think that there's just, I don't really, I haven't really honed in on a lot of younger players to really know enough about them to say. I mean, it's slide guitar. I mean, there's just the obvious people that, that everybody knows about. And they're all wonderful, of course. But as far as like people who aren't well known, I'll tell you, there's one guy who deserves a little more notoriety. His name is Ned Evett.
I know Ed.
Ned plays glass neck guitar. So he puts a piece of mirror or glass on the neck of his guitar, and he plays without a slide, and it sort of sounds like a slide, but he's got his own style worked out, and he's really great. Going back to that question you asked me prior to that, who I'd still like to work with, I can't forget that if the Rolling Stones called me up, even just to jam, I'd probably be on that plane.
Oh man, I hear you. Yeah.
It's not going to happen, but they're still alive.
Never say never.
I thought I'd point it out. Came to mind as I was talking.
Well, let's say here's a scenario I could see it happen. Mick Taylor's supposed to join them on stage again, and for whatever reason, plane's late, he gets sick, whatever, and they're playing Nissan Stadium or whatever's taking Nissan Stadium's place there in Nashville. I could see Mick or Keith going, "Hey, we got to call Rick. Let's just make it happen."
Well, I'm sure they don't know who I am because that was a long time ago that we met.
Well,
but I'd have to put the car in high gear for that one.
If you could put together a super group of musicians and do any of the kind of music you like playing, blues, rock, whatever, what would that super group look like to you? If you could just pull them all together, money no object, distance no object, what would your super group look like?
Are they alive or dead?
It doesn't matter. Let's dream.
Well, I would have either Mick on drums or Fred Below, the drummer that played on so many of the Chess records and Chuck Berry songs. Bass player might be somebody like Willie Dixon, the upright player, Johnny Johnson, or Otis Spann on piano. I don't think you really need any more than that.
Well, piano, it's funny you should mention it. I just saw, and he lives in your neck of the woods, A.J. Croce, Jim Croce's son.
Oh.
He did a lot of work with Leon Russell and others. And, if you haven't listened to him, Rick, you need to check him out. This guy is phenomenal. He was just here last week, interviewed him a couple times. And he was 2 years old when Jim died. And he does a show called Croce Plays Croce. I think this is the last year he's doing it.
Played here in Franklin. I think we may have spoken on Facebook or something years ago. But yeah, I've heard a lot of great things about him. I will check him out. His father grew up one town over from where I grew up.
Wow.
So, and he was certainly a great singer, songwriter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, AJ's amazing on the keys. He plays it all, especially, getting into that was it Captain Beefheart that said boogity woogity, or one of those other players? But that boogie woogie sound of blues.
Yeah.
I was just watching him and just going, man, where's he getting all this from, man? It's just a convergence of everything he grew up listening to.
I really love boogie woogie piano playing. Dr. John was great at it, and Jules Holland over in England is great at it still.
Yep.
But there's just a whole lineage of great black boogie woogie piano players that I listen to all the time. I love that style. Gets me going.
There you go. But well, I've kept you a long time. Couple final questions. You mentioned the sequel. You got enough material to release a volume 2. Any idea when that might come out?
No, I think eyes are going to be on this one, and seeing if like the blues people pick up on it, or if the other audiences pick up on it. And I would sort of gear the direction of the style of the songs in that direction, perhaps more than one more than the other. So I'm kind of waiting to see, because like I said before, I've got a lot of different styles represented in my instrumentals, and picking the right songs, compilations is a big challenge. So we'll see about that. Maybe, a year from now, shouldn't put out more than one record a year, I don't think.
Not these days. It's kind of, back in the 60s you could, but...
yeah, they wanted you to.
Yeah, now it's got to be more of an event. And I think we have the 70s to thank for that. But and the other question I wanted to ask you is, and it's not meant to be a macabre question. I've asked a lot of artists this type of question in different ways, but my favorite way of asking it is, once you step off the great tour bus of life at the great gig in the sky, to borrow from Pink Floyd, how do you want to be remembered, and what do you hope your legacy is?
Well, I hope I'm remembered as a good father and husband first, and I hope I'm remembered as a nice guy and somebody who played pretty music and that was memorable to people and touched them in some way. That's good enough. Maybe a good friend to my good friends.
Very cool. Very cool. I sense that you are. So, well, Rick, this is a lot of fun. I could have asked you a million more questions, but I'll let you go for now. And I promise you I will circle back through Mark about this other conversation we were talking about.
No problem.
I think that would be so much fun, and I'll maybe even collaborate with you guys ahead of time on how. I'm okay at doing the questioning and coming up with the questions, but if there's anything in particular that you and Mick would want covered, I'd be more than happy to get that from you ahead of time, so we can just let things go the way you guys want it to, and just have fun with it. I think that's going to be a blast.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I like that idea.
Well, listen, I hope I get to meet you in person in the meantime. Maybe one of these trips I make to Nashville, we can meet for coffee or something. And in the meantime,
Randy,
stay healthy, stay well, and good luck on this record. I think it's going to be received very well.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Hope it is.
All right. Take care, my friend.
Take care, man.
All right.
Bye-bye.
This has been another fun-filled episode of Boomerocity with your host and producer, Randy Patterson. The theme song is Roll the Dice and is recorded and used by permission from Quentin Hope. Quentin is spelled Quinten, and Hope is Hope. And you can find out more about Quentin at quentinhope.com. Post-production is done by Cardinal Sins Productions. The Boomerocity name, logo, and content is copyright protected. Segments may only be used with written permission by Boomerocity and or its assignees. Inquiry should be directed to input@boomerocity.com. Copyright 2025.